Across the 17 known galaxies, one universal truth echoed through every spacefaring civilization: humans were cowards. The Galactic Empire's xenobiologists had studied them for decades through long-range observations. These fragile, short-lived creatures from a backwater planet called Earth seemed to spend most of their time avoiding conflict, creating elaborate social structures designed to prevent war, and showing remarkable restraint even when provoked. The Empire's military doctrine was built on this assumption. Humans were classified as pacifist tendency species useful for diplomatic negotiations, trade agreements, and menial labor, but utterly useless in combat. Their homeworld wasn't even worth conquering, it would fall without a fight. But the Empire made one critical error in their assessment. They had been watching humanity during peacetime. They had never seen what humans became when someone threatened their family. They had never witnessed the transformation that occurred when a human's protective instincts awakened. And they certainly had never encountered Amanda Chen, a woman whose very existence would shatter their understanding of what it truly meant to be human. The Empire was about to learn that there's a vast difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. What follows is the story that changed the course of galactic history, told through the eyes of those who witnessed humanity's true nature for the first time. A story of one woman who refused to let an entire galaxy burn, and, in doing so, revealed the sleeping giant that Earth had always been. The first sign that the Galactic Empire had fundamentally misunderstood humanity came during what they called Operation Silent Dawn. Admiral Zextai of the Third Dominion Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Victory, watching the blue-green world called Earth rotate peacefully below. His forearms gestured dismissively at the tactical display showing the planet's primitive defensive installations. Pathetic, he rumbled through his translation implant, his scaled hide rippling with amusement. Their most advanced weapons are barely capable of reaching orbit. Intelligence was correct, this will be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. The bridge crew, representing 12 different species from across the Empire, nodded in agreement. Everyone knew humans were cowards. The observations were clear: a species that had spent centuries creating international law, establishing peace treaties, and forming organizations dedicated to preventing warfare. They had even stopped testing their most powerful weapons decades ago, clearly indicating their unwillingness to engage in serious conflict. "Sir," the communications officer, a crystalline being from Veltar Prime, chimed with harmonic frequencies, "were receiving multiple transmissions from the surface. Surrender offers, requests for negotiation, and what appears to be diplomatic immunity papers." The bridge erupted in laughter, or the equivalent sounds their various species made to express amusement. Admiral Zextai's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. As predicted. Patch me through to their leadership. Let's make this quick and painless for everyone. The main screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. She wore what appeared to be a simple business suit and sat behind a wooden desk with a small flag behind her. The admiral was initially confused. Where was the military leadership? The Grand Throne Room? The intimidating War Council? "I am Secretary General Amanda Chen of the United Nations," the woman said calmly. "I represent Earth and all its inhabitants. I assume you're here to discuss terms?" Admiral Zextai nearly laughed again. This small, fragile creature was their leader? She looked like she could barely lift one of his ceremonial weapons, let alone command a military force. "I am Admiral Zextai of the Galactic Empire's Third Dominion Fleet. You will surrender immediately and prepare your planet for Imperial processing. Your species will be relocated to designated colonies where you can serve the Empire's needs. Comply, and your people will be treated humanely." Amanda Chen was quiet for a long moment, and the Admiral noticed something strange. The tired look in her eyes hadn't changed to fear, as he expected. Instead, there was something else there, something he couldn't quite identify. "And if we refuse?" she asked simply. "Then, your cities burn, and your people die needlessly. Surely you can see the futility of resistance. Our ships number in the thousands. Your defensive capabilities are laughable. Your weapons couldn't even scratch our hull plating." Amanda nodded slowly. "I see. And our children? The civilians? The billions of people who have nothing to do with politics or warfare? Collateral damage is regrettable but acceptable, the Admiral replied with practiced indifference. Though casualties can be minimized with swift surrender. The Admiral expected tears, perhaps begging, maybe a desperate attempt at negotiation. What he didn't expect was for Amanda Chen to lean back in her chair and do something that confused every being on the bridge. She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't a fearful smile. It was something far more unsettling, the kind of smile that made every predatory instinct in the Admiral's body suddenly alert. Admiral, Amanda said quietly, you've made a critical error in your assessment of my species. And what error is that, human? You assumed that because we choose peace, we're incapable of war. Her voice remained perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. You studied us during our peaceful periods and concluded we were weak. But you never asked the right question. Despite himself, Admiral Zextai felt compelled to ask, what question? Why did we choose peace? Before the Admiral could respond, alerts began sounding across the bridge. The tactical officer, a six-legged arachnoid from the Hive Worlds, scuttled quickly to his console. Sir! We're detecting massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. Some kind of launching sequence? Impossible, the Admiral snapped. Our intelligence indicated they dismantled their nuclear arsenals decades ago. The tactical display updated, showing hundreds of launch signatures erupting from hidden silos across Earth's continents. But these weren't the primitive nuclear weapons the Empire had observed. The energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. Amanda, the Admiral said, his voice losing its casual arrogance for the first time, what are those weapons? The human woman's smile widened slightly. Oh, those aren't weapons, Admiral. Those are my children. Your children? Every mother has a line that cannot be crossed, Amanda explained conversationally. You just crossed mine. The first projectile struck the inevitable Victory S shields and passed through them like they weren't there. Alarm shrieked as the Admiral watched in horror as the object, no larger than a human transport vehicle, embedded itself in his flagship's hull. Hull breach on Deck 12, someone screamed. No, wait, it's not breaching, it's... Sir, it's moving. Through the ship's internal cameras, they watched as the cylindrical object unfolded like a mechanical flower. What emerged was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered, a humanoid figure in advanced armor that seemed to bend light around itself. Admiral, Amanda's voice continued from the speakers, still maddeningly calm, let me properly introduce you to humanity. You see, we didn't get rid of our weapons. We just stopped testing them on each other. More projectiles struck ships throughout the fleet. Each one carried what Amanda called her children, but the Admiral was beginning to understand these weren't biological offspring. They were something far worse. The figure in his ship moved through corridors like death incarnate. His crew's energy weapons bounced harmlessly off its armor. Physical barriers crumpled like paper before its advance. When it reached a group of his soldiers, the Admiral watched in growing horror as they were neutralized in seconds, not killed, he realized, but somehow rendered unconscious with surgical precision. We spent centuries learning to fight wars, Amanda continued, as if she were discussing the weather. We became very, very good at it. Then, we learned something even more valuable, we learned when to stop fighting ourselves and focus that expertise elsewhere. This is impossible, the Admiral roared. Our intelligence-your intelligence watched us during peacetime and assumed that was our natural state, Amanda interrupted. But, you threatened our children, Admiral. Our families. Our home. You've awakened something we've kept carefully contained for generations. The armored figure had reached the bridge level. Through the bulkhead, they could hear the sounds of his security forces being systematically neutralized. The sounds were growing closer. What do you want? Admiral Zextai demanded, his proud posture crumbling. I want you to understand something very important, Amanda replied. We choose peace not because we're weak, but because we're terrifyingly strong. We learned that our capacity for warfare was so devastating that we needed to find another way. But choice, Admiral, is a luxury that exists only until someone threatens what we love most. The bridge doors exploded inward, and the armored figure stepped through the smoke. For the first time, the Admiral could see the warrior clearly, and what he saw defied everything he thought he knew about humans. The armor was sleek, almost organic in its curves, but clearly incorporating technology beyond the Empire's understanding. Energy crackled along its surface in patterns that suggested a power source far more advanced than anything in their databases. But it was the helmet that truly terrified him, a featureless black surface that somehow conveyed more menace than any alien visage he'd ever encountered. "Amanda Chen sends her regards," the figure said in a voice distorted by the armor's systems. "You have exactly 10 minutes to recall your fleet and withdraw from Earth space." "And if we refuse?" the Admiral asked, though his voice cracked as he said it. The armored figure tilted its head slightly. "Then, you'll discover why we spent so much time learning to fight wars, and why we decided it was too dangerous to ever stop." Through the ship's communications system, reports were flooding in from across the fleet. Every ship had been boarded. Every ship had been neutralized wasn't the right word. They were still functional, still armed, but somehow completely under human control. Admiral Zextai realized with dawning horror that this hadn't been a desperate last stand. This had been a demonstration. A measured, controlled response that showed exactly how outmatched his forces were. "How?" he whispered. The armored figure seemed to consider the question. "Your empire spans 17 galaxies, Admiral." "Impressive. But you've been thinking in terms of conquest and occupation. We've been thinking in terms of defense and precision. While you were building bigger fleets, we were building better soldiers." On the main screen, Amanda Chen appeared to be reading something, completely relaxed. She looked up as if just remembering they were there. "Oh, Admiral, I should mention, those aren't our best troops you're encountering. Those are what we call our diplomatic corps. They're trained specifically for non-lethal resolution of conflicts." Her smile returned, somehow even more unsettling than before. "You really don't want to meet our actual military." Admiral Zextai felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of conquest, genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. Fear of an enemy that had just demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't exist. "What are you?" he breathed. Amanda Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "We're parents, Admiral. We're teachers and doctors and engineers and farmers. We're poets and artists and dreamers. We're people who love deeply and laugh often and mourn our losses." She paused, and her voice grew steel-hard. "And we're a species that learned, through painful experience, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be prepared to fight for what matters most." The Admiral's communications officer looked up with terror in his crystalline structure. "Sir, I'm receiving withdrawal orders from Imperial Command. They're telling us to retreat immediately." "How is that possible? They can't have reached Imperial space so quickly." The armored figure on his bridge spoke again. "Admiral, while you were focusing on Earth, my colleagues were having similar conversations with your command structure across all 17 galaxies. The Empire's leadership has just learned the same lesson you're learning now." Amanda Chen leaned forward slightly on the screen. "You have a choice to make, Admiral. The same choice we made centuries ago. You can continue believing that strength comes from the willingness to hurt others, or you can learn what we learned, that true strength comes from the ability to protect what you love." Admiral Zextai looked around his bridge at his crew, beings from a dozen worlds, united under Imperial conquest, but now staring at him with something he'd never seen before, doubt. "If we withdraw," he asked slowly, "what guarantee do we have that you won't pursue us? Won't conquer us in return?" Amanda's smile softened for the first time, becoming almost maternal. "Because, Admiral, conquest was never the point. The point was keeping our children safe. And, now that you understand what we're capable of, our children are safe. That's all we ever wanted." The armored figure moved toward the door, pausing only to add, "Your 9 minutes start now, Admiral. Choose wisely." As the human warrior disappeared into the corridors of his ship, Admiral Zextai realized that everything the Empire thought it knew about warfare, about strength, about power itself, had just been proven catastrophically wrong. And, somewhere deep in his mind, a new thought began to form, a thought that would change everything. What else had they gotten wrong about these remarkable, terrifying, impossible humans? 3 standard galactic cycles had passed since what Imperial historians would later call the Awakening. Admiral Zextai, now bearing the unwanted distinction of being the first Imperial commander to retreat from a supposedly primitive species, found himself in an unprecedented situation, sitting across a simple wooden table from Amanda Chen in what humans called a coffee shop in Geneva, Switzerland. The irony wasn't lost on him. The most powerful military force in 17 galaxies had been invited for afternoon tea. "Thank you for coming, Admiral," Amanda said, pouring a dark liquid from a ceramic pot. "I know this must be difficult for you." Zextai's forearms remained carefully folded, his scaled hide rippling with barely contained confusion. The past 3 years had been unlike anything in Imperial history. Instead of the expected human expansion into Imperial space, or demands for tribute, or any of the typical post-victory behaviors, Earth had done something that defied all military doctrine. Nothing. Humanity had simply returned to their previous activities: farming, building, creating art, raising their young. It was as if they had forgotten they had just defeated the largest military force in known space. "I don't understand your species," the Admiral admitted finally. "You demonstrated the ability to neutralize our entire fleet in minutes. Your technology is clearly centuries ahead of ours. Your warriors are." He paused, still struggling with the memory. "Yet you've made no demands. No territorial claims. You haven't even established a defensive perimeter beyond your own solar system." Amanda nodded thoughtfully, sipping her coffee. "That confuses you. Everything about you confuses us." Zextai leaned forward, his frustration evident. "My command has spent 3 years analyzing what happened. Our best tactical minds, our greatest strategic thinkers, every intelligence agency in the Empire, none of us can understand your next move because you don't seem to have one." "Maybe that's because you're looking at this from the wrong perspective," Amanda suggested gently. "Tell me, Admiral, what did you think would happen after you withdrew your fleet?" Standard post-conflict protocol. The victor establishes dominance, sets terms, begins expansion into the defeated territory. Basic Imperial strategy that has worked for millennia across countless species. And, if we had done that, what would have been the result? Zextai considered this. War. Endless war. Other Imperial factions would have united against the human threat. Border conflicts, proxy battles, escalating violence until... He trailed off, understanding beginning to dawn. Until someone developed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems, Amanda finished. And, then, someone else would develop weapons capable of destroying entire galaxies. And, we'd all be right back where we started, except with body counts measured in trillions instead of billions. The Admiral's translator implant struggled with the concept. "You're saying you didn't conquer us because it wouldn't solve anything?" "I'm saying we learned something valuable from our own history, Admiral. Every time we won a war, we just created the conditions for the next war. The only way to truly win is to change the game entirely." Through the coffee shop's window, Zextai could see human children playing in a nearby park. Their laughter carried on the breeze, carefree and innocent. He watched as they included a young Veltarian refugee in their games, a child whose crystalline structure caught the sunlight as she ran with her human friends. "Those children," he said slowly, "some of them are from Imperial worlds." "Refugee families," Amanda confirmed. "When the Empire began collapsing into civil wars after your retreat, a lot of civilians needed somewhere safe to go. We've been taking them in." This was perhaps the most baffling aspect of human behavior to the Imperial mind. Instead of taking advantage of the Empire's sudden instability, Earth had opened its doors to refugees from the very civilizations that had come to conquer them. "Why?" Zextai asked. "These are the children of your enemies." Amanda's expression grew slightly sad. "Admiral, that little Veltarian girl playing hopscotch didn't choose to be born into a war. Neither did the Keth Moran boy teaching her the rules, for that matter. Children are just children, regardless of what star they were born under. But, the strategic implications are exactly what you'd expect, Amanda interrupted. Those children go home to their families and tell them about Earth. About how humans treated them. About the friends they made and the things they learned. Do you think those families are likely to support another invasion of Earth? Zextai's mandibles clicked together as he processed this. It was a form of warfare, but unlike any he'd ever encountered. Instead of destroying enemies, humans were creating allies. Instead of inspiring fear, they were generating loyalty. You're weaponizing kindness, he realized. Amanda laughed, a sound so unexpected that several patrons turned to look. Admiral, that's the most human thing anyone has ever accused us of. Yes, I suppose we are. Though we prefer to think of it as strategically applied compassion. A new voice interrupted their conversation. Amanda, sorry to bother you, but we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim territories. Zextai turned to see another human approaching their table, a tall man with graying hair and the bearing of a military officer. What struck the Admiral immediately was that this human showed no deference to Amanda's apparent authority, no formal protocol. He simply walked up and joined the conversation as if they were equals. Admiral, this is General Marcus Webb, head of our diplomatic corps, Amanda said by way of introduction. The same diplomatic corps that neutralized my entire fleet? Zextai asked with what might have been humor. Among others, yes, Webb replied, settling into a chair. Though we prefer to think of it as aggressive peacekeeping. What's the situation, Marcus? Amanda asked. 3 Imperial factions are converging on the Kepler 442 system. Intelligence suggests they're fighting over the dilithium deposits there. The problem is there are approximately 40,000 civilians on the colony worlds. Amanda sighed. Evacuation options? Limited. We could get maybe 5,000 out before the shooting starts. Zextai listened to this exchange with growing confusion. These humans were discussing an imperial conflict as if it were their responsibility to solve. Why do you care what happens in imperial space? Both humans looked at him with expressions of genuine surprise. Because people are going to die, Amanda said simply. People who aren't your species. People from worlds that tried to conquer you. Yes, Webb added. So? The casual dismissal of species loyalty was so alien to imperial thinking that Zextai's translator struggled to process it. I don't understand. What strategic value do these civilians represent to Earth? Amanda and Webb exchanged a look that the Admiral couldn't interpret. None, Amanda said finally. They represent no strategic value at all. Then, Admiral, Webb interrupted gently, may I ask you something? Do you have children? Zextai's hide rippled with surprise at the personal question. Yes. 3 offspring. Do you love them? Of course. Why? The question seemed absurd. Because they are my offspring. My genetic legacy. My contribution to the continuation of my line. I see, Webb said. And if they were not genetically related to you, if they were adopted, or from a different clutch, would you love them less? That's not how it works for my species. We are programmed by evolution to care for our genetic offspring. Humans are too, Amanda said. But, we learned something interesting about ourselves over the millennia. We discovered that our capacity for love wasn't limited by genetics. We could expand it. Expand it? To children who weren't biologically ours. To people who didn't look like us. To beings from entirely different worlds. Amanda gestured toward the park where the children were still playing. We learned that love isn't a finite resource. The more you give away, the more you have. Webb leaned forward. Those 40,000 civilians in the Kepler system? Some of them are probably parents. Some of them are children. Some of them are artists and teachers and engineers who just want to live their lives in peace. The fact that they happen to be genetically different from us doesn't change that they're people. And, people deserve to be protected, Amanda added. Not because of their strategic value, but because they have value in and of themselves. Zextai felt something shifting in his understanding not just of humans, but of everything he thought he knew about civilization itself. You're saying you'll risk human lives to save Imperial civilians because they matter? We're saying we'll risk human lives because all lives matter, Amanda corrected. And, because the alternative, watching 40,000 people die when we have the power to prevent it, isn't really living at all. The Admiral stared at these two humans for a long moment. Everything about their reasoning went against millions of years of evolutionary programming. Species protected their own. Resources were limited. Survival demanded prioritizing genetic relatives over strangers. Yet here were these impossible beings, calmly discussing how to save the lives of people who had recently tried to destroy them. How do you do it? He asked finally. How do you override your evolutionary imperatives? Amanda smiled. The same way you override yours when you choose to show mercy to a defeated enemy instead of executing them. The same way you override them when you choose justice over revenge. Evolution gave us the capacity for cooperation, Admiral. Civilization is what happens when we choose to use it. But, the cost dash is worth it, Webb said firmly. Every single time. An alert chimed from Amanda's communication device. She glanced at it and frowned. The Imperial factions have accelerated their timeline. We have maybe 6 hours before the shooting starts. Recommendations? Amanda asked Webb. Full diplomatic corps deployment. We can probably neutralize all 3 factions before they fire a shot, but it's going to require exposing some of our newer capabilities. Do it, Amanda said without hesitation. Zextai watched this exchange in amazement. These humans were about to deploy their most advanced military assets to save people who meant nothing to them strategically, knowing that doing so would reveal secret capabilities to potential enemies. You're going to save them, he said. It wasn't a question. We're going to try, Amanda replied. Would you like to help? The question hit the Admiral like a physical blow. Help? You know Imperial tactics better than we do. Your insight could save lives. Human lives? All lives, Webb corrected. Including the Imperial forces. Our goal isn't to destroy those 3 factions, just to stop them from destroying each other and the civilians caught in the middle. Zextai felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a moment of moral clarity so sharp it was almost painful. He thought of his own offspring, safe in Imperial space. He thought of the 40,000 civilians who were about to die. He thought of the human children in the park, playing with refugee children from worlds that had tried to destroy Earth. Yes, he said quietly. I'll help. Amanda's smile was radiant. Thank you, Admiral. Shall we go save some lives? As they rose from the table, Zextai realized that something fundamental had changed in him. For the first time in his military career, he was about to fight not for conquest or territory or resources, but for the simple principle that all people, deserve to live. It was, he thought, a remarkably human way to wage war. And, perhaps, he was beginning to understand, that was exactly the point. 10 years had passed since the Kepler 442 intervention, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the Empire Admiral Zextai had once served. He stood now on the observation deck of the starship New Harmony, watching as the latest group of Earth's diplomatic corps prepared for what humans had termed aggressive peacekeeping in the troubled Andromeda sector. The ship itself was a marvel that exemplified everything the galaxy had learned about human engineering philosophy. Where Imperial vessels had been built for intimidation, massive, angular, bristling with weapons, the New Harmony was elegant and functional. Its flowing lines suggested speed and grace, while its hull incorporated technology that seemed almost organic in its efficiency. Still getting used to it, Admiral? Zextai turned to find Amanda Chen approaching, though she looked remarkably unchanged despite the passing years. Humans, he had learned, aged differently when they had purpose. The ship? Or the mission, he asked. Both. Either. You tell me. Zextai's forearms gestured toward the viewport, where three Imperial factions were positioning themselves for what promised to be a devastating battle over mining rights to an asteroid field. Unfortunately, that asteroid field was currently home to a civilian research station housing 2,000 scientists from 14 different species. I spent 40 years of my military career learning how to conquer enemies, he said thoughtfully. The past 10 years learning how to save them. I'm still not certain which was more difficult. Amanda joined him at the viewport. What do you think? Conquering is easier, Zextai admitted. Destruction is simple. Creation is complex. But... He paused, searching for the right words in his still imperfect human. Creation leaves you with something worth having afterward. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear the final preparations for deployment. The voices were calm, professional, and represented dozens of species. That, perhaps, was the most remarkable change of all. Status report, Amanda called out. Diplomatic Corps Alpha through Gamma are ready for deployment, came the response from Commander Sarah Martinez, a human who had joined the Corps after the Kepler intervention. Imperial tactical consultants are in position. Refugee protection protocols are active. Imperial tactical consultants, Zextai mused. I never thought I'd live to hear former Imperial officers referred to by that title. You never thought you'd be one of them, Amanda pointed out with a smile. That was true. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After the Kepler intervention, where human forces had successfully prevented a three-way war while evacuating 40,000 civilians, word had spread throughout the collapsing empire. Not just about human military capabilities, but about their methods. Species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare suddenly found themselves confronted with beings who had perfected something far more difficult, the art of preventing warfare while protecting everyone involved. The trickle of defectors had become a flood. Imperial officers, scientists, engineers, even entire civilian populations had requested asylum on Earth or Earth-protected worlds. Not because they were fleeing defeat, but because they wanted to be part of something better. Amanda, Commander Martinez's voice came through the calm, were receiving communications from all three Imperial factions. They're asking for our terms. Our terms? Amanda looked genuinely surprised. Yes, ma'am. They want to know what we want in exchange for allowing them to settle this dispute peacefully. Amanda and Zextai exchanged a look that had become familiar over the years, the look of humans trying to explain concepts that seemed impossible to everyone else in the galaxy. Patch me through, Amanda said. The main screen flickered to life, showing three separate feeds from the Imperial faction leaders. Zextai recognized two of them, former colleagues who had once shared his absolute certainty in the rightness of Imperial conquest. Gentlemen, Amanda began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had first confused Zextai a decade ago. I understand you're having a dispute over mining rights to the Tau Ceti asteroid field. The resources are ours by right of discovery, declared Warlord Kethmore, his insectoid features clicking with aggression. The claim was filed under Imperial protocols that no longer apply, countered Admiral Velfek, her crystalline structure glowing with indignation. Both claims are superseded by our prior salvage operations in the sector, added General Zixhai, his scaled hide displaying patterns of dominance. Amanda listened patiently to each argument, nodding as if she were a teacher waiting for her students to finish reciting their lessons. I see, she said finally. And, the civilian research station in the field? Collateral damage is acceptable if they refuse evacuation, Kethmore replied dismissively. The scientists are non-combatants and, therefore not our responsibility, Velfek added. Civilian casualties are regrettable but unavoidable in military operations, Zixhai concluded. Zextai watched Amanda's expression carefully. He had learned to read the subtle changes that preceded what humans called taking the gloves off. Gentlemen, Amanda said, and her tone had shifted almost imperceptibly. Let me explain the situation from our perspective. You have three military forces preparing to engage in combat over resources that none of you actually need for survival. In the process, you're prepared to murder 2,000 innocent people whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We are not murdering anyone, Kethmore protested. They can evacuate. In the time you've given them? With the resources available to them? You know as well as I do that's impossible. Amanda leaned forward slightly. So let me ask you a question. What do you think happens next? The three faction leaders looked confused. I mean, Amanda continued conversationally, what do you think we do when we see three military forces about to massacre 2,000 civilians? Zextai almost smiled. He had seen this particular human tactic enough times to recognize it. Amanda wasn't making threats. She was simply walking them through the logical consequences of their choices. You'll stop us, General Zixai said slowly. Oh yes, Amanda confirmed. We'll stop you. All three of you. Simultaneously. Your fleets will be neutralized, your commanders will be detained, and your forces will be sent home to explain to their families why they chose to participate in mass murder. You can't threaten the Imperial Navy. Kethmore raged. I'm not threatening anyone, Amanda replied calmly. I'm simply explaining what happens when you threaten civilians under Earth protection. Which, by the way, is what we declared the research station the moment we learned about your dispute. Velthek's crystalline structure dimmed. Earth protection? As of 10 minutes ago, yes. The Tau Ceti Research Consortium has requested our assistance in relocating their facility to a safer location. We've agreed. So you see, gentlemen, this is no longer about your mining dispute. It's about protecting people who have asked for our help. Zextai watched the faces of his former colleagues and saw the exact moment when they realized they had walked into a trap entirely of their own making. By threatening civilians, they had given Earth exactly the justification needed to intervene. What do you want? Admiral Velthek asked quietly. I want you to stop treating people's lives as acceptable losses, Amanda replied. I want you to sit down with each other and work out a solution that doesn't involve killing anyone. And I want you to understand that the galaxy has moved beyond the idea that might makes right. And if we refuse? Zixai asked. Amanda's smile returned, the same unsettling expression that had terrified Admiral Zextai a decade ago. Then, you'll discover that while we've spent the last 10 years teaching the galaxy about peace, we haven't forgotten anything about war. Through the ship's tactical displays, Zextai could see the deployment of Earth's diplomatic forces. What the Imperial factions couldn't see was the precision of the operation. Every ship had been infiltrated. Every weapon system had been quietly disabled. Every command structure had been compromised. The three factions were already defeated, they just didn't know it yet. However, Amanda continued, I prefer to think of this as an educational opportunity. Educational? Kethmore spat. Admiral Zextai, Amanda called out, would you mind sharing your perspective with our friends here? Zextai stepped into the communication field, and he saw the recognition dawn on his former colleagues' faces. Zextai? Velthek breathed. You're working with the humans? I'm working for the humans, Zextai corrected. There's a significant difference. You've betrayed everything the Empire stands for. The Empire stands for conquest, exploitation, and the subjugation of the weak by the strong, Zextai replied calmly. Yes, I betrayed those principles. And it was the best decision I ever made. He gestured toward the viewport, where the human deployment was proceeding with clockwork precision. Watch them work, he said to his former colleagues. Really watch. Look at how they coordinate. Look at how they protect even the people they're fighting against from unnecessary harm. Look at how they accomplish in minutes what took us years of brutal warfare to achieve. The three Imperial commanders watched as human forces systematically neutralized their fleets without firing a single shot that could cause casualties. This is impossible, Zixai whispered. No, Zextai said. This is what happens when you stop thinking of war as a way to destroy enemies and start thinking of it as a way to create friends. On the screen, they could see the civilian research station being smoothly relocated by Human Engineering Corps, its 2,000 inhabitants completely unaware that they had been in mortal danger just hours before. 10 years ago, Zextai continued, I commanded a fleet of 10,000 ships. I had conquered 47 star systems. I had personally killed more beings than I could count. And, do you know what I had to show for it? His former colleagues waited. Fear. Hatred. The constant knowledge that someone, somewhere, was planning to do to me what I had done to others. Zextai's mandibles clicked in what humans had taught him was amusement. Today I helped save 2,000 lives. Beings I had never met, from species I barely understood, who will never know my name. And, for the first time in my life, I understand what humans mean when they talk about satisfaction. Amanda stepped back into the communication field. Gentlemen, you have a choice to make. The same choice Admiral Zextai made 10 years ago. You can continue believing that strength comes from the ability to hurt others, or you can learn what we learned, that real strength comes from the ability to help others. And, if we choose to continue as we are? Kethmore asked. Then, you'll continue as you are, Amanda replied simply. Alone, afraid, and wondering when someone stronger will decide to do to you what you've been doing to everyone else. But, if we choose your way? Amanda's smile became warm, genuinely welcoming. Then, you become part of something larger than conquest. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. You become part of a galaxy where children can grow up without fear, where species can cooperate instead of compete, and where the strongest thing you can be is kind. The communication feeds were quiet for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Valthek spoke. What would we need to do? Start by standing down your fleets, Amanda suggested. Then, we sit down together and figure out how to resolve your resource dispute in a way that benefits everyone involved. Including the 2,000 scientists whose research might actually help us find better ways to extract what you need without destroying entire star systems. You would help us negotiate with each other? We would help you learn to negotiate with each other, Amanda corrected. There's a difference. Our goal isn't to control the outcome, but to ensure that whatever outcome you reach doesn't require anyone to die. One by one, the 3 Imperial commanders agreed to stand down their forces. As the communication feeds ended, Zextai turned to Amanda. Another successful intervention. Another chance for everyone to learn something better, Amanda replied. Including us. What do we learn? Amanda gestured toward the viewport, where the 3 Imperial fleets were beginning to withdraw to safe distances. That it's possible. Even after millions of years of evolution programming us to compete and fight and destroy each other, it's still possible to choose something better. And if they revert to their old ways once we're gone? Then, we'll come back and have this conversation again, Amanda said simply. As many times as it takes. Because the alternative, giving up on the possibility that people can change, isn't really living at all. Zextai watched the human crew preparing for the next phase of the mission, the delicate work of helping 3 former enemies learn to cooperate. Around him, beings from dozens of species worked together with a harmony that would have been impossible under Imperial doctrine. Amanda, he said finally, may I ask you something I've wondered about for 10 years? Of course. When your diplomatic corps first boarded my ship, when you first demonstrated what humans were capable of in warfare, were you bluffing? About having better weapons, more advanced technology? Amanda was quiet for a moment, and Zextai thought she might not answer. We weren't bluffing about our capabilities, she said finally. But, we were bluffing about our willingness to use them destructively. The truth is, Admiral, our most advanced weapons are designed to preserve life, not destroy it. Our most sophisticated technology is built to bring people together, not drive them apart. So when you said we didn't want to meet your actual military, I was telling the truth. You really don't want to meet them. Amanda's smile was mysterious. Because if you ever have to meet our actual military, it means our diplomatic corps has failed. And our actual military's job isn't to defeat enemies, it's to turn them into friends so thoroughly that they never want to be enemies again. Zextai contemplated this as he watched 3 former Imperial fleets beginning the delicate process of learning to coexist. That's terrifying, he said finally. Yes, Amanda agreed cheerfully. We're very good at being terrifying. We've just learned to be terrifying for the right reasons. As the new Harmony prepared to depart for their next intervention, Zextai realized that the galaxy had indeed been conquered. Not by force, not by superior firepower, not by the traditional methods of imperial expansion. It had been conquered by the radical idea that everyone deserved to be protected, that every life had value, and that the strongest thing anyone could be was kind. And, perhaps most terrifying of all, it was working. In the distance, he could see the first joint patrol vessels, Imperial and human crews working together to protect trade routes from pirates. Further out, former enemy species were collaborating on research projects that benefited everyone involved. Children who should have grown up learning to hate each other were instead growing up learning to help each other. The galaxy was being transformed, one act of kindness at a time. Admiral Zextai had spent his career conquering worlds. But it had taken humans to teach him how to conquer hearts. And, as the new Harmony jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward their next impossible mission of turning enemies into friends, Zextai found himself looking forward to discovering what other miracles were possible when you chose to believe that people, all people, everywhere, deserve to be saved.